pivotal because of their observed potential for successful lessons or replications. The collection of data was done through semi-structured interviews, but also 2 field visits, one in Colombia and one in Argentina. And we collected data regarding aspects such as the achievement, as you can see here on the figure on the left, the achievement of objectives, and also the enhancing of resilience and well-being, and the availability of things such as resources, capacities, and partnerships for the long-term sustainability of the introduced activities. Today, because of the brief time we have available for this talk, unfortunately, I will only present you some lessons from the case in Argentina. Well, here we assessed a solution on wetland management and conservation in the Pozuelos Biosphere Reserve, which was part of the Conserving Wetlands program. In this region, increases in temperatures without significant increases in rainfalls are unfortunately leading to water stress, and the indigenous families that live in the area, which are mainly dedicated to cattle ranching, for example, particularly with sheep and llamas, are highly vulnerable to drought and water security. Moreover, the intervention area was already degraded by other factors such as mining, water diversion, but also overgrazing from these cattle ranchers. So in this case, the solution that was introduced included community-led wetland restoration activities, that is constructing small dams and reconverting previously excavated artificial drinking holes for cattle with solar pumps for the extraction of water. The project is working very closely with local residents and authorities to promote sustainable grazing as well. And they have made a lot of efforts to strengthen the community's adapted capacities through trainings and the development of, for example, a good production practice manual and a grazing management plan and a wetland management and restoration plan. The solution here is being led by Wetlands International Fundación Humedales in collaboration with provincial and local authorities, but also with indigenous and local indigenous organizations. Here, as I say, we had the opportunity to conduct a field visit supported by Wetlands International, and thanks to that, 14 direct beneficiaries from the local communities and authorities could be interviewed. What we found, some of the most relevant achievements of the solution so far have been the restoration of more than 84 hectares of high-ending wetlands through the construction, for example, of water and sediment traps and the rain water harvesting and storage activities, setting enclosures for the passive recovery of vegetations, and also some planting. The interviews, for example, reported already significant improvements in water availability and the regeneration of pastures for the animals. And importantly, the well-being and adaptive capacities of the local populations have been improved thanks to the conduction of trainings, but also to the close involvement of population in the decisions that are taken as part of the program in the area. In terms of sustainability, our findings show a strong local ownership and co-management, mainly, as I say, thanks to the full involvement and consulting of populations in the implementation process. For example, here women and Aboriginal communities have played a very important role. Moreover, knowledge is now embedded via indigenous governance and the development of the plans. And there is still a continued collaboration with provincial institutions, for example, through discussion panels and the building of a strong relationship with public agencies supported by the implementers. Nowadays, as it was reported during the interviews, the project has already awakened the interest of other communities to replicate their activities. However, as in all cases, of course, there have been some challenges that the project has been facing or has encountered through these years. And this includes the continued reliance of beneficiaries on the facilitation provided by Wetlands International, and of course the need for continuous financing, external financing. At the same time, the communities in so many other mountain areas, as we all know, are unfortunately facing an aging population and the migration of young people, something that could limit the continuity of the introduced practices in the long term, for example. And finally, there is a persistence of droughts and climate variability, which unfortunately they cannot directly control, but is threatening the recovery of, or could threaten the recovery of wetlands. Some of the cross-cutting lessons that can be taken not only from this case, but also from the other solutions that were evaluated, include that importantly we observe that local ownership serves as foundations of sustainability and should be prioritized. Building trust, for example, with local community group leaders can help creating enabling environments. Communities are said over and over during the interviews will sustain practices that demonstrate improving their daily life. For example, through the improvement of access to food, water, or new forms of income. Also, institutional continuity and financing are critical after project closure, and so it's very important the design of long-term financial strategies for every case, so that communities are later capable of giving continuity to the activities on their own, or maintaining the infrastructure or equipment that was introduced. At the same time, education, awareness, participation is necessary both for ownership and sustainability of solutions, and it is very important, for example, to co-produce knowledge, integrating already available indigenous knowledge, local experiences, and integrate their science and policy, of course. Our interviews also highlight that the integration of risk management with ecosystem restoration efforts can bring multiple benefits. It is important in most cases to consider the various elements of the system so that the co-benefits that can be maximized and improve the resilience and well-being of the communities. And finally, the integration of across the scales is critical so that they can ensure that local actions align well with regional and national adaptation strategies. We can say here that social dimensions then are as important as technical ones. And with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much. I unfortunately cannot be present at the event, but I trust that this brief introduction will serve as a basis for the discussions that will follow. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any comment or questions. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Julia. She laid now the ground for discussing success factors further, and with that I would like to invite our three panelists. Please, Pradyumna, Luis, Daniel and Roman, join us here on the floor, have a seat. We now have on the stage our colleague Pradyumna. Pradyumna is a Global Engagement Interventions Manager at ICIMOD, and he will share some insights from the Himalaya Hindu Kush region. We also have Roman and Luis Daniel. Luis Daniel is a program coordinator with Gondesan, and Roman is a program coordinator with Wetlands International. Both will share some further insights from the Andes region. Thank you very much for joining the conversation today. I really look forward, and I hope you all do as well, to listen from your experiences now as well. I have a few questions prepared. I also hope that the audience have some questions. We will have some time to also discuss them afterwards. So I would like to start with you, Roman. The project you are involved in was briefly introduced by Julia, and I'm now wondering whether there are some additional lessons learned or key success factors you would also like to highlight.
Thank you, Johanna. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I would say that Julia made an excellent work at making a resume of our work in this area of the dry Puna. We are working above the 3,000 meters above the sea level in a dry area, 350 millimeters. And I say this because it will frame the following statements. Working with communities that are striving to survive is not like working with any other people that might want to change the car. They're every day trying to get the food. For that, the solutions that you may want to provide need to be in a consensus, need to be heard first, which were the solutions that their grandparents would use and they lost, and how to bring them back because they were effective. But nowadays they're under much pressure of the climate change, so they're looking for other ways, but they don't really know how to deal with that. Many times they just lost those uses of the land. So that's one, listening to them, learning from their previous experiences in the area and try to adapt to the new conditions. Then another very important point of view is to work with women. This is not because it's fashionable, this is not because it's a must do, this is because the women of the area are the ones that manage water, manage wetlands, where they rely for grazing their animals. They are the ones that bring water to the animals every day with a bucket, 5,000 buckets a day. So in order to change the way they use water, women, it's the way to go, talk with them. Yeah? And another thing, it's you need to be there. You need to have a long-term program. And for that, we thank very much DOB Ecology that supported us along these years, and the Netherlands Embassy in Argentina, which also provided some funds. And we need to go on working because these changes are not one day to another. These changes need to be held by the government to see that it's a very effective way to deal with climate change. It's a good investment, and that's the way we think we need to upscale. And for that, the international organizations are the best way to move the governments towards adopting these new or old methodologies that were lost all along the region. So I will leave it there and then we'll continue. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Roman, for sharing your experiences. And yes, I do have some further questions, but now let's move on to another region. Pradyumna, we are also curious to hear from your point of view. How do Julia's findings resonate with your experience? And yeah, what specific experiences do you have, or also maybe you can share some concrete actions you have been implemented to address cryosphere-related challenges in your region, the Himalaya Hindu Kush region?
Thank you so much for the question, Joanna, and thank you so much for having ICIMOD and me as one of the panel. I think this is a very good platform where we are actually, like you mentioned, we're discussing solutions and not just the problems that we are facing. And I think learning from different regions, I mean, problems and solutions, I mean, I think is good. Issue-wise, what you just asked, Julia, I think what Julia presented, I think we face similar issues in the region. I mean, just to give a small background to, I mean, participants, of course. I mean, we work basically in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, that is around 3,500 square kilometers. It's often referred to as the third pole as well, because having the largest amount of ice reserves apart from the two poles. So it is a region which is quite, important for the region, but beyond the region as well, because there are a lot of people that reside within the region. There are estimates around 240 to 250 million people that are living in the region. But like you mentioned on the Cryosphere, the water services and other ecosystem services that the region provides, it kind of transcends to nearly more than 1.5 billion people living downstream in the Indo-Gangetic plains and the other river basins. So I mean the region is very significant, it's very important, but of course the region is facing a lot of challenges from climate change, like all over the world. And I mean one of the biggest issue is of course due to global warming and other factors like even issues with black carbon and things like that. Of course our glaciers are melting quite rapidly over the past couple of years, over the past decade I would say. And I mean what we at ICIMOD do is we are basically an intergovernmental knowledge center. So knowledge, our space is basically bridging knowledge, policy and implementation. That's where we come in. And so what we are doing in terms of Cryosphere is, of course, our region, of course, until very recently did not have, it was like if you look at the IPCCAR 4 reports, I mean, there was not much information in our region. So, I mean, what we do is kind of co-create with our regional member countries that we work with, having experts not only from the region but global experts to have assessments in the region in terms of cryosphere, in terms of water, but just to understand what's the changes that are taking place in the region. And that information then of course we use it for policy but also for implementation. And in terms of solutions, I mean what Julia presented, and I think there are a lot of things that we are doing at the local level that are quite similar. I mean we do work a lot on the rangelands, because in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region also nearly 60% of the land area is actually rangelands. So we are working with pastoralists and how to local communities and how to kind of develop plans for rangeland restoration, working with them together and using their indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and coming up with, I mean also trying to bridge the modern scientific knowledge that we have and trying to come up with solutions, which we have been piloting in many parts of the region, in Bhutan, in Nepal, but also in trying to pilot in Pakistan as well. But water also in the mountains is a big issue. I mean something I think you also briefly mentioned. So there, at least in the mid hills of the Hindu Kush Himalayans, I mean the lifeline, the water is from springs that come from springs. So what we are doing is we are actually working on springside management initiatives. We have a protocol that is developed that we are using across the region, trying to scale it as well. I mean we work with local communities and local governments to implement that. But I mean because due to climate change, of course the spring sources are also kind of drying up. It's climate change and anthropogenic changes. So we are trying to identify areas which have a lot of stress and changes in water availability, and trying to work with local governments and communities in terms of developing protocols and interventions in how their water availability and water access can be improved. And I think it's similar to what already was mentioned, because even water access is difficult, and women are often the ones who face that burden of collecting water for your household, your family, and for agriculture as well. So we are working towards providing solutions in that as well. I think I can come later as well if that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Pradyumna, and also thank you for highlighting again women, as well as knowledge sharing, co-creation, and then also bridging scientific knowledge with traditional knowledge as well. I suggest that we now come back to the Andean region, but more from a regional perspective. Luis Daniel, you work for an organization that engages on a regional level, and this makes me wonder what are the main factors from a regional perspective, factors that make solutions, adaptation actions successful across diverse mountain contexts and also countries.
Well, thank you very much for the panel, for organizing this, and also for being here. Yeah, the integration of scales, I think, is one of the main principles that we try to apply. I think, the work at the local level has to be the foundation, and it's essential. And then, when you have work at the local level, there are, I think, several factors that are critical. One is that you stay, and Roman already mentioned this, on the long term. Changes and solutions for climate change adaptation cannot be implemented in the short term, and we have to avoid this temptation of moving from one place to another as organizations. This can be done, but you need to have your core sites where you have long-term learning processes which allow you to build up. The other thing is then that you have to document what you're doing and monitor in time and then report it effectively. And I think that's a big problem, because sometimes donors find it difficult to put money into the monitoring. They prefer the money to go only into the implementation. But if you don't monitor in the long term and you don't document, it's very difficult to upscale it, to compare it, and to share what we have been learning and also what we are doing wrong. And there is no way of learning if you don't know, if you don't measure the changes that you are actually implementing in social terms or also in ecological terms. And so for the regional work, for us, it's critical to have these long-term sites, to work together with these long-term sites, to have them document what they do so that we can share and compare between different contexts. And that's the other thing. When you work at a regional level, you discover that climate change impacts and climate change adaptation can be really different between regions. And so you cannot apply recipes, like if they were cooking recipes that are copied from one side to another critically and without being adapted to local conditions. And I've seen many crazy things in high mountain work. For example, one of the big problems we have is that people want to plant trees everywhere, because this is the traditional restoration strategy. You work in the forest, you do restoration, let's plant trees. And then, okay, let's plant trees at 5,000 meters to recover glaciers. This is completely crazy. And this is happening in the region. So adapting the adaptation solutions to the local context is fundamental. This has to be based in an effective dialogue between the scientific perspective and the local knowledge. But the dialogue has to be in both directions. It's not only, okay, let's do what the communities are doing and what they're saying, because if this was the only perspective, then everything would be perfect, and of course it's not. So we need to have a real dialogue in which these processes are effectively monitored so that they can be shared. And the other critical aspect, and with this I finish, that we have seen is to work at multiple scales in the political side as well. So you need to have more in the evaluations that we have done in the Andes. One of the biggest gaps that we see is that national climate change adaptation policy is not talking with local experiences, and local experiences are not communicating with the national policies. And then these national policies have to be integrated at the regional level to be brought here to forums like this, so that you can come to the global level. And I think in that context, the Andean Mountain Initiative and the Alpine Convention and the regional conventions can play a critical role, or ICIMOD, which works with a regional perspective, in bridging this gap, communicating to the local level and then working together to bring these issues to the global level. And yesterday we had an example, there is this call to generate a permanent dialogue for mountains, and this has been built by the works of years of this regional organization of pushing local work to the global level. So I think that integration of scales is super critical.
Thank you for sharing your experiences and highlighting the dialogues and working across scales. This now leads me again back to you, Pradyumna, working now in a complete different world region. How does this resonate now, what Luis Daniel has shared?
I think I completely agree with what Luis just mentioned. What is required at the moment is that kind of how do we get local solutions, local information, local knowledge into national, regional and global this thing. And what we are doing, I mean, at least in parts of our region is, I mean, that's where, at least at the, when we are working with local communities, the solutions that that are emerge, or any research we are doing at local level as well, we try to ensure we do convene basically regional science policy dialogues. So I mean, we have science policy and investment dialogues. That's what we call them. So, and they are done basically in thematic areas, in cryosphere, we do it in air pollution and things like that. So the intention of having that platform is actually getting information, ideas from the local level, from different countries, but also the science that is being generated to policymakers and implementers at national level and at a regional level. And what it does is then, of course, these policymakers, of course, they of course come to these global events like in COPs, and how we try to help them, at least from ICIMOD's perspective, we try to help them to translate what learnings and key messages have come out actually from these regional science policy dialogues, what solutions have come out actually, how, I mean, we help them in translating them into, you know, these negotiations and things like that. And I think, I mean, also what Luis Daniel just mentioned, I mean, the dialogue, the consultation which the Brazilian presidency, I mean, conducted yesterday, I think it was one example of what, I mean, years of efforts that we've been putting in, I mean, not just regional organization, but also parties as such, has resulted in, and we are very hopeful that, you know, mountains actually, you know, start featuring much more strongly into negotiations, but also have a good platform for dialogue, annual dialogues and things like that, where all these, you know, from different regions, local perspective, national and regional perspectives can feature in those dialogues, so that we understand each other regions, you know, better. And in my experience, at least, I mean, you know, all mountain regions, we are facing the same crisis, and, you know, solutions are also similar. So it's always good to have these, you know, exchanges in information, so that then we can take with our policymakers and negotiators and bring it to global scale.
Thank you. To share your experiences again and highlight this importance also of translating, working across, but then really translating a bit between different stakeholders, between different scales. Working across scales was also mentioned by Julia, so I assume that, Roman, this is also a topic you have something to share. Yeah, what I'm wondering is what is from your perspective critical in terms of partnerships and collaboration you see as most critical to work across scales between different stakeholders?
Thank you. Yes, a very good question. We work, as maybe Luis Daniel mentioned before, both ways, top and down across the net. So we can build trust with the communities. As I said, you need to be there, and also you have to make commitments yourself as a, let's say, as a program, and themselves as a commitment to put their efforts besides what they do every day, a little bit towards the commitment that you agreed. And also you have to have formal agreements with authorities, local authorities, to be transparent with them and keep them informed, because that also builds trust. Governments many times feel maybe a bit envious of the capabilities a program like small program like ours can have. So we need them to feel that it's part of their own achievements. It's not only for us, it's for the people, it's for the environment, and they can claim that. I think that's a key. So they like what we're doing. They don't see us as a competition. And to start working with both the directors, secretaries, ministers, but also to take the technicians on board to make that, you know, approach of pertinence to hold as something that they build together with us. That's something that it's key again. And I wanted to go back to the information platforms just for a second, if you allow me, because we also made a geoportal on the impacts of lithium in the region, and that needs to be shared internationally to show how these solutions that we're looking, everybody's looking for the climate change, needs to be well done, needs to take into account these very poor communities. And if you are extracting lithium, you really need to do it in the right way, and it's not the state of the art today. So that's why information exchange, putting these platforms up front, again, is key to work in the big network of the global solutions we are providing for this climate change. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman, and also thank you for highlighting trust, transparency, and information exchange again. I would now like to ask the audience if there are some questions for the panelists. Are there any questions? No? No questions? Then I ask the panelists, would you like to ask each other a question? Maybe. You have one, Luis Daniel.
Yeah. No, I found that this about the lithium portal very interesting. So how this is integrated into your wetland management work, and what's the relationship, and what kind of information are you putting up in the portal?
Thank you, Luis Daniel, for this step up on this part of our program. Lithium mining, it's a big issue in the region, in the dry Puna. And because it is extracting water from a dry area. That's not good anytime, is it? So this platform provides information which is updated and easy to download on important sites for biodiversity, also on publications which are also updated regularly, and also on the mining impediments that are now at least available for us, and those are updated too. So for managers, authorities, that should be a tool to take decisions which take into account these hotspots of biodiversity. There are lots of endemisms in the area. So we hope that that's one way to deal with that. And also because it puts up front the need to change methodologies for the lithium extraction, because that's where the communities are taking their own sources to survive. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Perfect. And I can see that there is one question. So.
Thank you, Johanna. I didn't want to leave the opportunity open and nobody talking, so I'm going to take advantage of the great presentation shared. And maybe this question goes to everyone, but especially to Daniel, who was bringing up the relevance of the regional perspective, and also the need of coordination across scales. So maybe I'm a Latin American, so I tend to think more in regional terms, and I was wondering how relevant or how important it is to your work, thinking at the regional level, the information that comes out of public policies such as glacier inventories, for example. How much of that tool in the countries that is being developed are you taking account, or are you making part of your initiatives to work across these different levels? Whether that information is of any use. Talking about the Cryosphere, I think glacier inventories become quite relevant information to make a case and to protect water and to adapt to climate change. So I was wondering how much that comes into play to associated to the work. That goes to Daniel and of course to everyone in the panel.
Thank you for the question. I think we have only a few minutes left, but we do have some time still.
Okay, now thank you. Very quickly, one thing, the regional perspective for us is essential, and when we started working on this program, the first thing we realized is that we had like at least 2 or 3 domains, the Northern Andes, then the Tropical Andes and the Southern Andes, and we were not talking to each other. If you try to look for integrated information, for example, on glaciers, you could find information on the glaciers of Argentina or the glaciers of Chile, but not on the South American glacier. Even if you wanted to know how many people lives in the Andes, we had to dig the censuses that are collected with different methodologies to put together a number. And so it has been very interesting to do that effort, and what we try to do is to put that into infographic pieces that become the essential tools for policymakers in the Andean Mountain Initiative to come to these forums. So when they want to know more about people in the Andes, that they can go and look at the infographic pieces that we are developing to try to integrate the information and provide a continental perspective. So I think that's very important because it gives the policymakers a sense to belonging to a region and not only to represent their national constituencies. And yeah, that has been a very, it's a process, but I think it has been very critical. And in the specific case of glaciers, we just published an infographic pieces on glaciers of the Andes. And what we try to do is then to use that information. For example, this information was used in Colombia last week to generate a dialogue of subnational governments to try to see if they can form a coalition. And what information do they have around the Andes? Well, they have this information and they use it to propose this coalition of subnational governments. So it's just, or to develop the national policy on glaciers and mountain ecosystems of Peru. Then they can look at this information and use it as part of the formulation process. So it might be a little thing, but I think it provides an environment in which these policies can be developed.
Yeah, we are doing similar things what Konde-san is, I think, doing as well. I mean, for the Hindu Kush Himalayan region at least, I mean, we have a lot of glaciers, but the issue is that there are very less monitoring stations across the region. So at least our work, at least what we've been doing is trying to help governments, at least in critical glaciers and glacial lakes. We are trying to develop monitoring systems, but also like Luis Daniel mentioned, we are bringing the experts and government together into one platforms and discussing this and letting them know that it's the same issue, that all countries are facing, and trying to develop and standardize methodologies and processes so that we get one kind of information from the region that all governments can use in global forums, but also at national level that they can use in explaining what changes are happening in the cryosphere, but also what kind of solution each government is actually pursuing in terms of not just adapting to them or monitoring them, but also in terms of disaster risk reduction, because a lot of these GLOBs also result in leaks result in GLOBs. So I mean, sharing that information and knowledge. But then of course we develop a lot of these knowledge products as well at a regional level. And why I'm saying this is, I think, something to continue what I was saying before, but also what Roman mentioned, is that I think what we've realized is science and knowledge needs to be translated, to different audience in a different way. I mean, what our findings say to politicians, we have to use a different kind of language that gets their attention. But when we work at local level, with local communities and local government, it's a very different kind of way we need to explain what is happening, and so that we get their buy-in. And I mean, just to add to all that also, I mean, on solutions, and I think what Julia also briefly touched on was, scaling and sustainability of solutions. I mean, I think that is where, I mean, it is important, I mean, the stakeholders that you work with and how you engage with them. Because, I mean, we're doing many solutions, of course, across the region. Some, of course, it is good that we work with local communities directly. I mean, mainly related to resilient agriculture and things like that. I mean, there we try to develop kind of models in which we try to get private sector, market approaches, so that at least once the piloting project is over, at least they have connectivity to the market. So there is financial flow, and it goes on. But then, like I mentioned on springs, spring water regeneration and things like that, those are also like what Luis Daniel mentioned. I mean, in mountains, each solution cannot be replicated. It has to be site specific. So there we work with local governments basically. So we found at least that if we can actually pilot successful actions, and together with them, of course, co-creating it, and have it in their local plans, annual plans, 5-year plans, then it kind of promotes that kind of sustainability, so that when a project is over or pulls out, they already have that human capacity, but also that financial capacity to replicate certain of the solutions, but also upscale it in certain levels. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think with that we have to close the conversation. Time is running fast. We have to close the conversation, but I'm confident that the dialogue will continue across different scales, across different regions, between sectors, between different stakeholders. Yeah, the dialogue will continue. With that, thank you very much also for your time, for being here today with us. Thank you to panelists to share your experiences with us today. All the best, and see you soon again for continued discussion. Thank you.